Do you like the little leaks? A leak here, leak there, everywhere, a leak everywhere.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to be a fence sitter on this one because I actually am with you, Brock. I'd rather have the suspense and get it announced one by one, you know, at 5.
No.
But now that I'm covering the team, it's helpful to make my travel plans early and get those tickets booked before they start.
That is fair. What's the best trip this year?
Oh, Nashville. Easy. Easy.
That's true. They got that new. Is their stadium new? They got their new stadium up and going, or is that still under construction?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I should, but I'm more interested in what's outside the stadium in Nashville than I am what's inside.
Hot chicken guy?
Sure. Heck yeah. I love live music, too. I mean, come on. Great place to listen to live music.
You know what's happening in Nashville in 2 weeks? Haley Heward's bachelorette party.
Oh, my gosh. Really?
Wow.
That's going to be some tall, blonde girls in hats, is what it sounds like. That's kind of what that whole experience sounds like. All right, so what jumped out? I read a lot of your stuff yesterday on the schedule because I'm not a big schedule guy. I lean into other people that are, and you seem to be as big a schedule guy as there is. You got all kinds of great information on the schedule.
Where do you find your indexes?
Yeah, seriously. Your indices.
My indexes. I don't know, man. They all just come I didn't sleep much last night, Mike. I actually woke up at 3:45 and I was like, oh man, rest differential. I haven't looked at rest differential for the schedule, so let's go figure that out. I think honestly, this has got to be one of the most friendly schedules that the Seahawks have had from the NFL. And I'm not talking about the opponents because the opponents are already set. But you don't have any back-to-back East Coast road trips. One of the things with this schedule is there's a lot of East Coast trips. They might not be the best teams, a lot of East Coast travel. They don't have a lot of back-to-back of that. They have a middle of the year bye week. They don't face a lot of tough blocks where you've got these just murderers row that they've had the past few years. You don't have any of these 3 games in 11 days kind of things like they did last year. So there's a lot of things that, they could have played on an international. They could have played, on Christmas or one of these other games that really can mess with team schedules. For the most part, it's a pretty vanilla schedule and pretty much just you play the teams you got, and if you're the best team, you're going to win.
Salk and I have hammered this for a couple hours now, looking at it just myopically through the Seahawks. What about the Rams? What about the Niners? What about the Cardinals? What about taking care of your division first? How did it set up for those 3 as well?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that the Rams schedule is considerably harder than the Seahawks schedule. And I think the 49ers schedule is the easiest in the NFL by almost any measure. Not only do the 49ers, play the opponents with the lowest winning percentage of anyone in the NFL combined, they also have one of the largest rest advantages. Last year they had a historically bad rest differential. Teams that were coming off bye weeks and the 49ers were not, and playing that over and over again can add up. But the Rams, I mean, I think that opening slate is pretty tough.
Pretty brutal.
You've got a lot of games on the road. You've got at Philly. You've got at Baltimore. Do the Seahawks have a single away game that you think is as tough as either of those 2 games for the Seahawks?
I mean, at Washington, depending, if they continue their upward trajectory, and certainly the league thinks and believes, I think, in DQ and Jayden, because they have a ton of primetime games. But
that's going to be fun, by the way. Coming off a bye, week 9, early November in Washington on Sunday Night Football. That's pretty good. That's a highlight game right there.
Well, Mike, I think if I remember right, you and I have different feelings about D.C. So I went to school, I went to college in D.C., American University. I love D.C., man. I love D.C. Great food, great city, a lot of stuff to do there. So I'm looking forward to going back and seeing a bunch of old friends.
I would just say great place to visit. I like to visit D.C. I don't know if I would want to live there again. I did that for most of a year.
But outside of that, Brian, and at Pittsburgh, honestly, I was saying that to Salk earlier, rank the top 10 over the last 10 years, the most difficult places to play in the NFL. Buffalo and Green Bay and Arrowhead and Baltimore. Like, you don't go to any of them. Right, if you're the Seahawks, and yes, Washington had a great year last year and are trending the right way. Pittsburgh without kind of an offensive identity and a quarterback. I mean, those are the 2 most difficult, I think, on paper road trips, but not like LA's got with that first place schedule.
And Brock, you'll remember this. This is probably a little before your time, Mike, at least in this market. But the Seahawks played at Jacksonville back in, I think, the Super Bowl year in 2005 and the first week of the season, and they dropped that game. It was hot, humid, like guys are getting IVs. Playing Jacksonville in October, I think, is in Jacksonville is a little bit better than playing them in September. So even little things like that are beneficial.
Yep.
Key win. Like as you look through the schedule, we keep seeing 8.5 as a Seahawks win total, which feels pretty low to me. Just kind of looking through the schedule, and I know you can't do wins and losses now. You don't even know who's going to be playing for half these teams by the middle of the season. But still, I mean, I definitely see 9 or 10 pretty winnable games for the Seahawks. If they get to 10-12 instead of 8-9, which games will be the key?
Well, you got to start with the first game. I mean, that game is, I think, the biggest game on the whole schedule. Home against the 49ers. That's a team that's had your number. You got one in San Francisco last year, and they're going to come into that game with an expectation that they are going to reassert themselves as the bully in the division. The Seahawks are coming in with the expectation to show that they're no longer the pushovers. And the other interesting thing with that is, with it being the first game of the season, are the 49ers fans going to take over the way they did last year? Because, I think the first game, season opener, you're probably more likely to get season ticket holders to attend. But that's going to be interesting. I think that's a storyline there. If they get that win, I think it sets up their whole season. I think the first 2 weeks of the season in general are going to set up their whole season, because if they manage to get both of those wins, I think they're skiing downhill the rest of the way.
Aside, Hawkblogger here with us, aside from crushing Salk on your home course, aside from studying indexes of every measurable variety with the schedule, you also, if I remember right, last year, didn't you kind of have an inkling to try to help with the resale of tickets and try not to see the stands full of the Mafia and the Cheeseheads and the Niner fans? What did you make of the Seahawks? What was it, last week?
This week.
It was this week already?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess we talked about it on Monday. Yeah. What did you make of the Seahawks, and how did that strike you with what they're trying to do in the resale market?
I think it's exactly the right thing for them to do. It's a gesture more than I think it's going to have a massive impact on what's going to happen. When I met with dozens of season ticket holders last year, had a town hall conversation about why they were selling tickets and what situations. I did a poll with hundreds, almost thousands of season ticket holders. Did a bunch of research on this, and honestly, the basic thing is going to be, if the team wins, you're going to get more home fans. That's just the reality. But we've had ups and downs before, so what's different? I think what's different is the prices of tickets are different, and they continue to go up, and they did go up again this year. I still, and the team and I see this differently. I've had many conversations with folks in the organization about this. I think the variable pricing is a big factor. They do not. So the fact of the matter that a ticket against the 49ers on prime time might be 10 times more expensive face value than a game against another team basically signals to a season ticket holder, I'm going to sell that seat because that's going to cover a big portion of my season tickets. And that means by default, you're getting people selling the biggest games of the season against your biggest opponents. And I think that that's a problem. So I personally would like to see a change in the variable pricing.
Going besides and beyond the schedule, we're talking to Brian Nemhauser, Hawkblogger, and you can find him at hawkblogger.com and all the other places where he puts out great content. Maura asked me a question yesterday, asked all of us a question yesterday. I'm going to throw it back at you. Over under 3.5 touchdowns for Jaylen Milro this year.
Is that any sort of
Any
touchdown?
kind of touchdown.
Ooh, Maura with a great question. I love that. Why would you not take the over?
Thank you.
I mean, who wants to be the guy taking the under on that? Like, that's not a fun take.
He's going to have 4 touchdowns in one game. He is going to be that's an exaggeration. I think he blows by that. Honestly, I think he blows by that. I think they find different ways to use him in and around the goal line. I think he runs for 4 touchdowns this year. How about that? I think he has 4 non-throwing touchdowns this year.
I mean, think about it. If you're in a short yardage situation at the goal line, why would you not have him in there? Why would you not have him and his old Alabama backfield mate, Robbie Oots, and whether it's Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, maybe Damian Martinez starts getting in there. Maybe Byron Murphy gets in there as a fullback. Who knows? But, like, give me that goal line setup. And I think, Jaylen Milro is just a huge weapon. Why would you not use him down there?
Yeah, I think the answer the coaches would say was, do you remember some of those snaps that went awry? And that was with Connor Williams and Geno down in that zone last year, that it's hard enough at times to have perfect continuity between QB and center that work together every day, Brian. And this is just what coaches would say. And then I'm going to bring in this package and that package, and he's going to handle this and he's got to handle that. And guys handling the ball that don't handle it the rest of the game all of a sudden are playing 4 plays and not 60. I think that there's probably another side. Certainly from a coach's element that would say, hey, boys, hold your horses just a little bit.
Where are you on?
There's always another side. I don't know if I agree with it. I would say Connor Williams had snapping problems throughout his career. Connor Williams was the problem.
You think so?
I think, hey, Brock, from what I hear, Clint Kubiak's an under-center guy. So let's get Jaylen Milro under center. You should have fewer of those types of issues.
Okay, from what I hear, you bought out the whole stadium yesterday with Pete Carroll coming to town for preseason game number 1. Did I hear that right?
Man, how fun is that going to be? It was great hearing him on your show yesterday, and it's such a fascinating relationship that I think Seahawks fans have with that guy, and credit to him for bringing the first championship to this franchise, and he's just a beloved figure. Even though I was one of the people that was advocating for, I think, a change at that position in the organization, I still think that was the right move. I'm certainly going to be rooting for Pete Carroll down in Vegas. I'm going to be rooting for Geno Smith down in Vegas. I hope that I think they're going to, 6.5 was their over under. I think that's an easy over to me too. When has Pete Carroll ever lost? Like, when has he ever won less than 7 games?
Yeah.
He just doesn't do it.
That's going to be hard. I'm going to have to figure out how I can root for Pete but not for Geno all at the same time. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I got to figure, they're on the same team. Well, I really love one of those guys, really don't like the other. So it's going to be really interesting to try to figure out how to, I'll twist myself into sort of a mental pretzel to try to.
Biggest takeaway from our 25 minutes with Pete yesterday. Anything jump out to you? As you've listened to him over his 14 years here in Seattle regularly.
I think one of the most endearing parts, and it's not just from your conversation yesterday, which was fantastic, but also listening to him at the owners meeting and at the combine, he was not aware of the depth of the relationship he's got with the Seattle fan base and the Seahawks fan base in the Seattle area, and the fact that he's still up here, and the fact that he cherishes that the way he does. I think that's a really charming aspect of a guy that's already incredibly endearing. And, the Northwest is always kind of the perennial underdog and the forgotten part of the country. And so having someone come up here and love it the way, I think I would say, love him. I think that's probably a fair thing.
Yeah, most endearing.
I think that's a great story.
And most beloved coach in this market's history. I mean, Don James is way, way up there with what he did in the 70s and the 80s and winning a national title in the 90s. Lou Piniella, even though he didn't get the team to a World Series, 116 wins, and his fire and his temperament and elevating everybody. I mean, Lou Piniella is going to be on that list. But most beloved and most revered, Lenny Wilkins, obviously winning the title in the 70s. Been a long time ago.
A long time. I think it's Pete. I mean,
be hard-pressed
certainly
to
in my
argue
time here. I was not here for the other
over
two.
the last 30, 40, 50 years in Pete Carroll.
Just coming back to this team for a minute, talking to Hawk blogger Brian Nemhauser, did they do enough on the offensive line for all of the success I think they had in the draft? Is their offensive line going to be good enough?
Yeah, well, look, I was on with you guys, and I was pretty clear in my recipe, which was you got to have a veteran. You can't take the youngest offensive line and just add a rookie to it and expect it to be enough. So I can't be a hypocrite and come on here and say, no, they did perfectly, because I don't think this is the ideal outcome for them. And they wouldn't say it was the ideal outcome. They wanted Will Fries, and they didn't get him. But here's the thing, guys. They've taken the higher risk path, but it's the higher reward path. If Gray Zabel is as good of a player as I think he is, and he was the first guy I mentioned to you when we talked at the Senior Bowl, I think that this line, being this young, coming together, growing together, could wind up being together for a long time and be very good if John Benton, if this scheme, if it all coalesces. But there's a lot of risk. There's just, admittedly, there is a lot of risk. I don't think, Mike, that there's a good chance that this will be a worse offensive line than last year. And I'll tell you why. Abe Lucas is going to be healthier. Abe Lucas is a very good player. He might end up being the best lineman on that group. You're not going to have Mike Jarrell and George Fant and Stone Forsythe out there.
Oh, there's another pressure. Of Stone.
Poor Stone.
39th pressure in 6 games.
Yeah, tough go of it last year. Yeah, it wasn't good. Okay.
And then you've got a pile at one guard position where you're trying to figure out between Anthony Bradford, Satawa Lamea, Christian Haynes, Bryce Cabledew, who I would not count out Bryce Cabledew. The best man win. Olu Timmy was not a problem last year, and if Jalen Sundell beats him out, all the better. So I don't think there's the downside risk of this offensive line the way there was last year, but they're young and they're going to have to develop quickly.
Last thing for me here for you, Brian. Give me the next 2 or 3 headlines you want from the Seahawks. Transactions, moves, is there a trade? Is there just a common sense? Let's just get these next 2 or 3 things done with the agenda of business.
Now that we know the order of the Seattle Seahawks 2025 regular season schedule, win-loss predictions are in full force, tickets are being purchased, hotel rooms and flights are being booked, and excuses for not showing up to work the next day are being prepped. This weekend's discussion is all about your most anticipated matchups on the docket. I specified regular season in the headline because I know a few of you will correctly write Super Bowl in the comments, so I've narrowed it just a tad. The San Francisco 49ers home opener should not only be electric, but an early litmus test to see if the Lumen Field stands will once again be heavily occupied by 49ers fans. That's not totally new, considering the number of Californians who live in Seattle and the ease of travel, but it hits different when the Seahawks aren't winning these home games. Then there's the possible DK Metcalf revenge game in Week 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose current starting quarterback appears to be Mason Rudolph. We shan't dare question Rudolph's powers, given what happened in 2023, but perhaps Mike McDonald's defense won't experience the same fate as several of Pete Carroll's defenses. On the topic of former Seahawks, I know the Tennessee Titans may not be projected to be a good team, but the Week 12 trip to Nashville means going up against number 1 overall pick Cam Ward, who should be throwing it to Seahawks legend Tyler Lockett. It's going to feel just as weird seeing Lockett in a Titans uniform as Metcalf in a Steelers uni. You've also got 2 primetime games on either side of the Week 8 bye, with the Seahawks hosting the Houston Texans on a Monday night and traveling cross-country to face the Washington Commanders on a Sunday night post-bye. Both the Texans and Commanders were playoff teams and will be popular playoff picks again this season, and perhaps a Super Bowl pick for Washington. One game I'd keep an eye on from an entertainment value perspective is Week 5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield had a high-powered offense last season, but once again lost an offensive coordinator to an NFL head coaching job. Tampa's offense is loaded, but its defense is just not good. This has shootout potential if the Seahawks defense doesn't bring its best. My biggest surprise is the fact that the Minnesota Vikings game in Week 13 was not selected for even a late doubleheader slot. It's just a 1:05 p.m. PT kickoff, which normally means a lower regional distribution. Sam Darnold led the Vikings to a 14-3 record, and that would have been a number 1. 1 seed most years. Surely that deserves some more play. And last year's game, in which Darnold outdueled Geno Smith, was a really fun, if devastating for us, contest. Lastly, Week 16 on Thursday night against the Los Angeles Rams. A reminder that all of the Seahawks division titles since 2010 have involved clinching at home against the Rams. Just something to think about.